wondering how I got into this mix.
But he's really been a brother, and his writing is beautiful and really helpful. And today he's talking about something a little bit different than in the past. He's going to be talking about uncovering trauma and becoming the warrior that we all are. And so I'm really excited to hear from him, and we'd just love for you to welcome warmly here to the Village stage to share Derrick Broze, everybody. Derrick Broze.
Is anybody awake out there? I know you were up all night, but day 2, time to keep going, right? Or day 5 for some of us. Who's been here the whole week? Who's been here longer than a week? Yeah, there's some of the, yeah. Hey, before I start, let's give a shout out to everybody who's making this happen, from the kitchen crew, the vendors, the builders, the sound people, Stephen Brooks, Sarah Wu, everybody who's made this happen. This is really like a 1,000+ person operation, and we get to come in here and just enjoy it for the most part and not have to stress about it too much. There's a lot of work behind the scenes. So my name is Derrick Broze. I think I got an hour. Okay, cool, awesome. So my talk again is uncovering trauma and becoming the warrior you're meant to be. I'm actually giving 2 talks, just for those who might be interested, and they're both going to be completely different. They sort of show the different sides of my work. Today we're talking more about spiritual kind of internal healing and that internal journey. On Sunday, my talk is going to be called How to Localize, Decentralize, and Opt Out of the Matrix. And it's more about community building and the physical side of things, how to unplug from these systems that are, I would say, not aligned with many of our values. But these 2 things are important. The reason I chose to do one that's more from here and the other one that's more focused outside is because that's what my work focuses on. So I'll tell you a little bit about myself right now, then we're going to rewind a little bit, and then we're going to talk about, I'm going to share some of my personal journey. Anybody here heard me talk before at Past Envisions? If you have, you've heard me share a little bit of my story, but today I want to share some things that I've kind of kept close to the chest over the years, and I think it might be helpful for some of us to hear. And I also hope to hear from you guys that we can share a little bit, because if you haven't quite got it yet, this journey is not just about partying your asses off. It's not just about complaining about government or corporations. Most of it is right here. What I call that internal tyrant, the struggle against our own doubts, fears, and insecurities, which we pick up along our environment and our path, and they differ from person to person based on your experiences and your upbringing. But we'll get into all that in a moment. So yeah, my name's Derrick Broze. I'm 35 years old. I'm based in Houston, Texas. I'm a freelance investigative journalist, documentary filmmaker. I have a YouTube channel and a website called The Conscious Resistance, which, as I said, focuses on kind of that duality, both sides of the struggle, as it were. And there's a few other labels we could throw on: author, activist, like I said, journalist, those sort of things. But generally, I just consider myself to be another free human being on this path, trying to learn how to empower myself and better myself all the time. What I'm about to share with you is some of the more darker sides of my life and my history. Now, I know everybody here lives perfect lives that are just perfectly Instagrammable, and there's never been a struggle a day in your life, right? Everybody here? That's what I thought. Okay, but I have some things in my past that definitely shaped who I am today. And without them, I wouldn't be here standing to you. So I think it's important to reflect back on that. So, like I said, today, journalists, making YouTube videos, documentaries, books, doing all that stuff, trying to educate people about the problems of the world, but also as an activist, as a community organizer in Houston, trying to focus on the solutions. How do we get to the next stage? Not just pointing the fingers, but also pointing the finger back at ourselves and saying, hey, we have a responsibility in this world too. Like my brother Rob does a great job. Anybody hear Rob speak last night? What's your next topic? When's your next talk, brother? Today? Tomorrow? Today, 4:45? Sunday? Okay, yeah, definitely. So I'll be speaking here Sunday, and Rob will be too. So come see Rob. I think he's one of the greatest examples of people who live by their words and principles through their actions, not just talking or posting about it on social media. And there's a big disconnect in that for many people. So 15 years ago, when I was 20 years old, I'd say early January 2005, late 2004, early 2005, I got hooked on crystal meth. I had basically been experimenting with different drugs for about a year or more, hopping from, all right, I'll just take ecstasy all the time. Anybody been there? You become a zombie after maybe 6 months of rolling 2 or 3 times a week? Well, if you haven't, let's avoid all that, I can tell you. Turn into a zombie after a little while, lose your serotonin, hard to feel anything, hard to know what's what, you're just kind of in a zombie state. Did that, and then I was like, well, maybe the answer is Xanax. Okay, I'll take Xanax all the time, black out, wake up in jail, wake up at a friend's house, okay, this is, wake up with a new girlfriend, like, all right, okay, this works. And went did that for a while, and then eventually found my way to cocaine, and eventually I tried crystal, and within 10 months of trying crystal, I was locked up in prison. But in between that time, I started to lose everything I had, lose friends, lose family, lose a lot of weight. Homeless, kind of got sucked into this whole drug world of being around career criminals, for lack of a better word, people who are content with being in that world and have no desire to change, I'll say. Like, to them, going to prison is just an occurrence that happens every couple of years. You deal with it, you get out, and you move on. You do it again, you might get caught again. And so I kind of got sucked into this whole world, and as I said, I ended up getting arrested in November 2005, so 15 years ago this year. Pretty cool. I was arrested the week before I turned 21, got locked up, and I'd never really been in major trouble, but I knew that I was pretty screwed, getting caught with a hard drug like crystal meth and some other paraphernalia on me. So between 2005 and 2008, I ended up doing 18 months in Texas state prisons. First 11 months, then out for 5 months, then back for another 3 months, then out for a year, then back for another 5, and then I got out, got on parole, and got on with the rest of my life. But in that space is where I really started to understand why I was using drugs. Because it was an escape mechanism. Anybody here ever used drugs as an escape mechanism? And whether it's, I just want to make this point. We have a lot of great speakers talking about psilocybin and psychedelics. You can use them and abuse them the same way. I was the guy that's like, I'm having a bad day. Well, I'll just eat a 10 strip of acid and that'll work out great. Yeah, that was an interesting day. But that's how I was dealing with things. It's just, I didn't want to feel it. I want to feel something else. I want to be in a different state of mind. And we don't all do that. We avoid things in different ways. There's also this term, has anybody heard the term spiritual bypassing? It's very common, I would say, in some of these communities. This is a person, and no judgment on anybody, it's a psychological term, look it up. This week you said you did a flotation tank and all your trauma's healed and everything's good. And next week you're doing crystal healing and everything's good. And then next week you're doing what are some more of these therapies? Whatever the latest trend is, right? You're doing colon cleansing, you're doing this. And not that there's anything wrong with these particular modalities of healing, but if you're just using them as another way to actually avoid doing the deeper work, then that's what they call spiritual bypassing. So I was using drugs as a way to escape. And it wasn't until I got locked up in prison and I was able to sit down and start asking myself, like, how the hell did I get here? Holy shit. And this is have you ever truly had a situation where you're completely powerless? Like a situation where you can't call mom, you can't call dad, boyfriend, girlfriend, friends. There's nobody that can rescue you. This is what I felt when I first realized when I got locked up that I was looking at the calendar and I was going to be here until at least the next year. And no matter how much time I spent on the phone calling my lawyer or, my mom or girlfriend or whatever, nothing was going to change that fact. And in that feeling of complete powerlessness, I actually found my power. I found it within myself, and I realized that I was in complete control of the situation. I could sit there on the phone and stress about what's my girlfriend up to, or what am I missing out there? Oh, it's New Year's, and I'm missing all the parties with my friends. And when you're in there, people refer out here as the free world. So you can sit there and worry about the free world all day, and your time is going to creep by and go very slowly because you're not being present, like in a lot of situations, but especially in there. So I started to just be more present. I started journaling every day. That was the first thing that I started to do, to kind of start going through this. Like, how did I get to this place? What was I avoiding? Why did I, it was such a rapid change from the day I tried crystal to I'm locked up, within 10 months, very quickly. And as I started to journal, my handwriting started to become more clear, more slow, more precise. My mind was slowing down. I started to discover meditation. I read one of the newspapers while I was locked up, and there was a quote from the Dhammapada, which is sometimes known as the Buddhist Bible. And it was a quote that really just struck me so deeply that I started getting my grandmother to send me a chapter a day from the Dhammapada. I started meditating, and being in prison and meditating, I think, is probably one of the most important places. Now, this was 2005. Now there's actually a growth of prison meditation programs. I've actually talked to a few different people who run them because, as anybody knows with meditation, it has great results. And especially, again, in a place like prison where there's lots of fear, there's lots of anger, there's lots of confusion. And there's also what I would consider very low-level, kind of primitive thinking. Like, when I first got there, so I'm native on one side of my family, well, on both sides, but in different ways, right? And I was like, I don't know if I really fit in over here or over there or what, right? But the Hispanic folks in the prison community came over to tell me that I was talking to a black guy and I couldn't talk to him because I was brown, basically. Like, no, you're gonna be with us. And I'm like, hey, I'm just here doing my time, dude. I'm like not here to get in any of that kind of crap. But that's the sort of mentality. Like, again, low level, primitive thinking. He's the same color as me. All right, we're all gonna hang out. And that's just what it is. So I just started meditating every day, morning and night, and also spent a lot of nights crying myself to sleep as I was reflecting on these things. And I started to get to the root of why was I using drugs in this way? Why was I just so determined to stick as many drugs in any orifice of my body I could until I was blissed out? And it went from drinking to this drug to that drug, and like I said, abusing psychedelics as well, not having any respect and not truly seeing the interesting thing. I had a crazy acid trip about 2 months before I got locked up, and I actually stared in the mirror for a few hours and had a three-way psychedelic telepathic conversation with myself that was telling me, stop. Like, it was me, I could see myself already locked up, just like, what the hell is going on? And this other part of me was like, yeah, let's go party. And I was kind of in the middle. I woke up the next day and threw away about $1,000 worth of drugs when I came off this trip because that was the message that I was getting. Unfortunately, you know, I did get myself sober, I want to say that. I got myself sober from crystal, but I continued to be around that life, thank you. And it was one of those sort of things, like I'll do one more last deal and then I get pulled over and, you know, I'm locked up. But I do think everything does happen for a reason. I never wanted to go to prison, but when I got there, I realized that, oh, there's a family lineage. There's at least 3 generations in the Broze family that have prison, have drugs, have alcoholism, and on both sides of my family, on the Sanchez and the Broze side of the family. My father, my birth father, I grew up visiting him in prison. At 5 years old, my earliest memory is visiting my father behind razor wire for his drug addiction that he struggled with his whole life. He actually died of a drug overdose 2 summers ago, and you know, he was never able to get out of it. But I grew up visiting him in and out of prison. And while I was locked up, you know, it was like I spent my whole life angry at this dude, like, why the fuck aren't you here for me? The first 7-8 years were very depressed. Little kid trying to figure out where's my family, where's my dad, what's going on. Then I got to be a teenager and it was like, you know, the dark side, right? I'm like, I'm gonna use this anger to make me strong and nobody's ever gonna hurt me again. And of course, that shell eventually led to like something, I need a way out. And that's when I found drugs and started, you know, going down that path. But I didn't see all this till I got locked up, and so I was able to start kind of looking at these relationships. So I wrote a letter to my father, who, interestingly enough, was also in another prison at the same time I was. And that was a real kick in the nuts, because I've been so angry at this dude my whole life, and I'm just like, here I am, you know, carrying on the family tradition. And I was determined, like, I knew this place is not for me. For one, the prison industrial system is a horrible, horrible place that treats people like shit all around. Even people who, like, you need some rehabilitation. I met some people who do not give a crap about any of the rest of us. They're not out there trying to make a better world, but it's coming from their own trauma, which is, again, the topic of today. But that system did not save me. It's not because of that system that I'm here today. I made a conscious, personal decision to connect with myself, to connect with the Creator, and to start healing my wounds. And I realized this comes back from generations of my family. As I said, my birth father spent time in prison. His father abused him and they had him when they were like 14, 13 years old. So by the time he was 10 years old, he was selling drugs for them. You know, it was not a good situation. My great-grandfather, he hung himself in prison. On my mom's side of the family, alcohol, drug addiction. I was around this stuff my whole life, but it wasn't until I got locked up when I was turning 21, starting to meditate while in prison, that I could see how clearly this was affecting my path. And I'm sure you guys are aware of the concept of generational trauma, intergenerational trauma. I mean, this to me is the perfect example of that. And also of epigenetics, that I believe what affected my father so deeply is because we have this scar in our lineage, you know, and I think it's ancient. So I've tried to do a lot of work with, you know, my ancestors and, you know, coming to ceremony and Sundance and really trying to heal those things because, man, guys, I'll be real with you. It fucked up half my life. I'm 35 now, and I feel like I'm 10 years old. I feel like I just started living. I spent the first at least 20, 23, and, you know, I can't say things have been perfect since then, but I definitely spent a lot of my early life lost and hurting other people in the process. You know, in my confusion, hurting other people that I came across. So I was very determined to figure this out. Like, how did I get this position? I wrote this letter to my father, told him, like, this is how I feel, this is, you know, the results of, I wouldn't say I placed the blame on him fully, but I did let him know, your actions led to this, which made me feel this way, and I chose to do this. And his response was, it's your responsibility, you need to take responsibility for your own actions. And that made me so angry. Now I'm like, damn, he was right. He was right. I was trying to put it all on him. But he, like I said, now I'm like, he's a hurt dude. He was very hurt till the day he died. He died in a hotel of a drug overdose, alone. And, that's a wound he was carrying his whole life. So as I'm meditating, as I'm getting to know these wounds and understand this part of myself, I remember, because it was sort of like I blocked it out with the drugs. I remember, I tried to kill myself 3 times before I was 18. I was depressed most of the early years of my life. I'm a self-harm survivor, if you could say that. I've seen some of you out there. We're out here. The scars are there. And I feel like this is the past I lived, right? Without that past, I wouldn't be here today. But I went through all those things, and man, a lot of times when I was in that path, I'll just be real. Like I said, my goal of this talk today is to share new things that I haven't shared about this, because it's part of my healing journey. There were times, 15 years old, sitting on the side of the traffic, and literally just watching cars go by, and I walk out in the street and there's no cars, and I'm sitting there just waiting to get run over in traffic. Like, this is what I was doing for hours at a time. And then I psyched myself out, but I would do that this is just where my head was at. I didn't want to be alive. I felt like so much immense pain, and I felt like a lot of it was my fault. Maybe it's my fault my dad's not around. Maybe something's wrong with me, all these kind of things that I think we internalize, sometimes consciously, sometimes unconsciously. And it was in prison where I started to peel back those layers. And of course, like I said, I did 11 months. That's when the process really began. I got out, unfortunately. They say you have to change people, places, and things. Well, I kind of went back to some of the same old things. I wasn't using drugs again, but I knew I could, I'm a pretty good businessman when I want to be. And, I got caught again. So I went back. The second time when I went back, I lost everything. I thought I lost everything the first time, but I actually had a girlfriend who waited for a year. My family would come visit me. The morning when I found out that my probation had been violated and I had to go downtown Houston and turn myself in for a minimum of 3 more months, I was at my mom's house, and it was early in the morning, and I didn't know what to say. She said, "You're turning into your father, don't come back." And, told me to leave, and then my girlfriend's driving me downtown, and she's like, "I can't do this again. I can't fucking do this again. I'm dropping you off, and this is it." And so, I get dropped off downtown, and it's just like, holy shit, how did I get here? Like, it seems so quick, I was barely out like that. And, I just buckled down even further. I took my meditation and my healing process even more seriously, and I started going through this process of asking myself very simple, but I think also sometimes difficult to answer questions among all of us. For one, who am I? Isn't that a big-ass question? So simple, right? But we really think about, I'm a journalist. That's your job, or that's the label, right? I'm a good friend. It's really difficult to get to the core of who is this self that we identify within each of us. Not just the labels we attach to ourselves or the image we want to portray on social media, but who we really are. And so I spent a lot of time, and I can't sit here and claim today that I know the perfect answer to that, but I know myself a lot better than I used to. I know now that when I feel pain or I feel discomfort, instead of just running to take 23 shots of whatever alcohol you got available or take a bunch of pills, that wouldn't even do anything for me anymore. I thought about it. There's times that I've been like, I'm so frustrated, I'm dealing with something. I wish I could go. I really don't, but in that moment, I'm like, I wish I could just go get fucked up again. That would make it so much easier. But it's not even like a thing, because I'm just like, that would be a waste of time. I'd waste my money. It's not going to do anything. I'm going to be sad afterwards. It doesn't work anymore. So the only answer is I got to face it. I got to deal with it. You can't run away from it. You can't spiritual bypass it. You can't just scroll, because the internet's another way to avoid things as well. You just scroll online all day, scroll through Instagram, whatever, and never have to stop and think about what you're feeling inside. It's very easy. So it's important for us to be more conscious of our actions and of ourselves. So I started to look at this idea of generational trauma, and as I said, my family is Seminole on my father's side, and I try to go to Sundance in Oklahoma, Choctaw Sundance, Eagle Sundance every summer, and it's been a very big part of my healing journey, as well as meditation and other different modalities, but getting to connect to my ancestors and to my wounds. And so the talk again is uncovering trauma to become the warrior you're meant to be. One of the things I like to do, that we're going to do now before we get into how to answer that question that I've shared, you guys are still with me? Yeah. I hope my story wasn't too depressing, and I just want to be real about it. And I will just say this, every time I've given a talk over the last 6 or 7 years and I share my story, somebody comes up to me and says, I've never touched a drug in my life, but this is how I relate to that, or this is what I'm struggling with, and that's the only reason I share it. I'm not here to boost my ego, boost myself. I want us to connect together. I'm sharing this because it doesn't do any good by staying in me, but if I can share it and help you, or we can help each other, Yeah, I'm gonna come up here and talk about it, okay? So let's do this, all right? Let's define, first, let's start by defining the word trauma. Throw out some ideas. How do you define trauma? Anybody?
Adverse experiences.
Adverse experiences? Anybody? Hurt? Emotional retarding. Okay, those are pretty good. So this is what the dictionary definition of trauma is. A wound or shock produced by physical injury or an experience that produces a psychological injury. Does that make sense to everybody? So again, the wounds of my childhood of being consistently lied to by my father and letters from prison. I'll be there for this birthday. I'll be there for this Christmas. I promised him to be there for that baseball game. And over and over. I grew up thinking that all humans just lie. That's just, okay, I guess this is what you do. You lie to whoever the hell you want, you do what you want. And like I said, I spent a lot of time dishing out some of that pain, and still working on forgiving myself for the ways that I hurt other people. But that trauma can come in different forms. And for, again, physical injury, it can also come in these emotional ways that are many times unseen, right? Because you can see somebody walk around this festival, they got a sexy body, they're wearing all the latest things, they bought some cool clothes from over here, and they got it together, and inside, something might be really eating them up. I'm definitely somebody that carries a lot of that inside, and sometimes we just got to be alone. Sometimes you need someone to listen to, but it's important to remember that. I think we can get caught up in our own bubble, and we don't always think about the ways our words affect other people, right? Especially when we're just kind of careless and mindless with our words. In a brief moment, you just frustrated at somebody, you just say something, and I'm not saying we should walk around on eggshells, but we need to be conscious. And I believe in nonviolent communication. Anybody hear those workshops recently? There was a couple of them already. Nonviolent communication, compassionate communication. Look up the book. It's very useful for life. But there are many people walking around with these wounds that, again, are unseen, right? So we're addressing how to uncover that trauma. So the first part of that is you got to be willing to address it. I wasn't willing to address and deal with my trauma. I was trying to avoid it with drugs and with other things, or with just, sleeping around and just casual sex or whatever, just different things. All the things that we fall into that make us feel like, oh, here's that feeling I was looking for. Oh, wait, now I feel empty again. Okay, maybe there's this one. Maybe it's this person. Maybe, and I did that for a good while, and it didn't work. But once I started to be willing to look at that, well, where is this coming from? What am I trying to heal? What am I trying to fill? There was a hole, or at least I believe there was a hole that was missing from my relationship with my father. And it's something that I'm still processing and learning from. So that's the first step, is just becoming conscious of your trauma. I want everybody, let's close our eyes and take a deep breath together. And as we take this breath, if you feel like sharing out loud or with your friends or whatever, or just in yourself, just think of something that might be a roadblock to you. This doesn't have to be something deep and crazy like what I'm discussing. It could just be like struggling to get that job you really want, or communicate better with your parents or your friends or whatever. But let's just take a breath and think of something, big or small, a type of trauma that you might be processing at the moment. Okay, so let's take a deep breath. Exhale. Now, if you have a situation, a relationship, a person in your mind that you're thinking of, again, this is some trauma, maybe somebody that you're having trouble forgiving, or somebody you've harmed and you're still having trouble forgiving yourself. Whatever it may be, just hold that with you as we continue this talk, because I want you to try to use the strategies that I'm going to share with you in addressing that trauma, okay? Thank you guys for participating. So, now that we've defined trauma, and this is uncovering the trauma and becoming the warrior you're meant to be, I'll define what warrior is. Again, the dictionary, well, first, again, what are our definitions? What are our own? Let's make up our own definitions. What does a warrior mean to you? Protector.
Fights for what they believe in.
Fights for what they believe in. Fearless. Fearless leader. Okay, anybody else? Warrior. How many warriors we got out here? A warrior is a person, and this is interesting, the way that the dictionary defines it. A person engaged in warfare, a soldier. It's kind of obvious, but that's not the one we're aiming for. A person with great vigor, courage, aggressiveness, especially in politics or athletics. So they focus on politics and athletics, which again I find interesting. But let's take it out of those contexts of politics and athletics and of war, because I don't think any of us are trying to start wars here. a warrior, I do see a warrior as somebody who's a fearless protector who fights for what they believe in. And the thing that I've learned, the thing that I've been taught from my elders and my teachers is that a warrior knows when it's time to fight, and a warrior knows when it's time to pray, and a warrior knows when it's time to sit, and a warrior knows when it's time to listen. It's not just this, like they describe, warfare, soldier, aggressive sort of thing. Being a warrior is that person that is in tune with themselves, and yes, fights for what they believe in, but I think it also comes from a deep place of compassion, right? I wouldn't consider somebody a warrior who's out there only fighting for their own ego or their own, I'm just going to screw this person over because it's for my own good. That's not a warrior. I don't know what that is, but it's not a warrior. The warriors are the people that I see here that come to beautiful places like Costa Rica and Envision and come here to learn. Like I just care and thank you guys so deeply as somebody who comes here to do workshops and has been traveling and coming here for the last 3 years. This is why I'm here. Because I've never been to another place where people come sit down in the jungle, they've got pen and pad in hand, and you guys are listening intently and we're connected in this moment. And I appreciate that more than anything. Because you could be anywhere else right now, and I really do appreciate that. So we're uncovering our trauma, our deep wounds, psychological wounds, physical wounds, to become the person that is fearless. There's a fearless protector that fights for what they believe in and comes from a place of compassion, right? Is that more clear now, what this whole thing is about, where we're coming from? So you've got that situation, that trauma that you might be holding on to, or a situation that is not where you'd like it to be. And I want you to just keep that in your mind. So I wrote a book 2 years ago, and by the way, all my books are available for free to download online on my website. And we have some over there, but I want you to download it if you find this interesting, because I made this book. It's called The Holistic Self-Assessment, and it's literally the process that I took myself through in prison. And it's a simple kind of workbook, guidebook that has space for you to write in and put your thoughts in. And it starts with very simple questions. Each chapter starts with a simple question. Each chapter ends with a simple exercise. So I'm going to share some of these questions with you because I think these questions, getting again to know ourselves better so that we can uncover that trauma that is holding us back or limiting us or just triggering us in different ways, start to heal those wounds so that we can become that fearless protector that cares about their community, that cares about themselves and comes from a place of compassion for everybody else, right? Because I don't come to Envision just to get a nice vacation and get paid a little money and give some talks just to hear myself speak. I do these things, and I've been speaking publicly since 2013 because I want to change the world. Does anybody else want to change the world and make it better? Yes, we do, right? But it has to start within, right? There's only so much we can do outwards if we're coming from a fucked up place inside, right? And this is what I realized when I started getting involved with activism, is I had my activist friends who we would do our rallies and our marches and protests, and then I had my kind of spiritual conscious circles where we did meditations and healing ceremonies and that stuff, but the worlds were completely separate and this is 2011, 2012. And I would talk to, let's start over here since we're in this community, I'd talk to my spiritual friends at the meditations and say, guys, did you see what the police are doing? Did you see, this new pipeline or this destructive thing? Whatever issue I was kind of focused on at the time of my work. And typically my response was, shh, don't talk about it. You're going to manifest it. Just keep it quiet. Keep it quiet. It's only good vibes over here. There was a very much turn a blind eye, deaf ear to the realities that are in the physical world that exist. This is real. This is real. And then over here, I'd be at the protests, the rallies, but hey guys, what are y'all doing later? Y'all want to come to this meditation, this conscious circle? Or I'd say something like, have you ever thought, maybe we're all God? And maybe we're just, and some go into some weird thing, they're like, are you high? What are you talking about? Like, they just weren't interested. And so for the first 2 years of my activism, I lived a dual life. I went to one thing and I went to another. And my activist friends, a lot of them were very much atheists. Nothing wrong with your personal beliefs, but they were closed off to anything deeper, right? And I was very much going through my kind of political awakening as well as a spiritual awakening. So I was like, I need both of these. And then in 2012, the summer of 2012, that phrase, the conscious resistance, came to me. And that's when I started my YouTube channel and website and stuff. And I consider that to be just the moment, the realization that the struggle for a more free, ethical, and just world is not going to come from only confronting the physical institutions of power, the corporations, the government, and various people we can point to that are screwing up the world, but also from our own internal struggle with our internal tyrant, that doubt, that fear, that insecurity, that trauma, right? You have to have both. And I think that if you're only focused on one, you're missing a big piece of the puzzle. And I mean that exclusively. If you're only focused on meditating, and I'm not saying you can be an activist and be a journalist and do the things I'm doing, but I do think it is imperative on us, each of us as individuals in the times we are living, to start paying attention to what the hell is going on in the world. Because your ignorance feeds the destruction of the planet, just straight up. The more we remain ignorant, the easier it is for people to come in and screw things up. I'll give you just a brief example. I actually ran for mayor of Houston last year after Envision, and I talked about all these same ideas. I was like, I hate politics. I consider myself what I call a holistic anarchist. And most of my friends, even my partner Miriam, like, what the hell are you talking about? You're running for mayor? And I'm like, just hold on, I got an idea. We can do this. And what this allowed me to do is to get out of this somewhat of an echo chamber, right? I was able to speak to high schools, to retirement communities, to poor communities, rich communities, black communities, white communities, Vietnamese. Houston's the most diverse city in the US, and there's all kinds of communities. People that aren't going to find me on YouTube, that aren't going to come to Envision Fest or any of the places I speak, just the regular normie people who need to hear this information too. And it allowed me to go to those things, and not only that, be on the same stage as the other politicians and call them out in their face, and that was fun. So that was cool. But also to bring this message, and I was the only candidate talking about permaculture, building food forests, turning vacant lots into community gardens, talking about ending the drug war in Houston, talking about ending police surveillance, just all these different issues that I'm sure many of you care about. And I use this mainstream, okay, I'm gonna run for office in the fourth biggest city in the country. The reason I share that though, again, the ignorance. I don't think, for me personally, that voting is the answer. I used to tell people, even here, right here, saying, if you're going to get involved locally, political politics, focus locally. And I think that is still the answer, but maybe in some places like Houston, it's not possible. Houston's a city of 3.5, 4 million people. So listen to these numbers, 3.5, 4 million people, 1 million registered voters. So you're already starting out with only 1/3 to 1/4 of people even doing that step. But then when it comes to electing the mayor of the fourth largest city in the country, who's going to make all kinds of decisions that affect people, not just in Houston, but around the country and the world, 200,000 people voted that guy. 200,000 people voted in a city of 4 million people. And I think it's because I used to take some sort of solace, like, yes, people are giving up the system, but I don't see that sort of non-action followed by any other action. It's just kind of like, yeah, we're not going to pay attention. And I had friends who were like, dude, this is awesome, thank you for doing that. I'm like, if you plan to vote, even though the voting wasn't a big part of me, I told them, like, hey, if we do get a reasonable amount, that might send a message. And they're like, oh, fuck no, I'm not voting, but thanks for doing it. And so I'm like, okay, the people I'm reaching aren't really the people who are going to go do that and play that game. But either way, the goal was to spread information. My point is, with that ignorance, we have a guy now running the city who's, I mean, I could go on and on about how corrupt this guy is, and it's because nobody's paying attention. And I realized as an activist, like, if you're out there doing things, and you know, I had to learn all these systems of how to go to city council and talk to them, who do I go about this problem, and try to teach other people. But because most of us are either caught up in our own trauma, caught up in our own shit, leading our own lives, or just distracted or overworked or what have you, not everybody has time to go to a city council meeting at 2 in the afternoon and try to fight against the local issues, right? It can be very difficult. But again, my point is, the more ignorant we remain, the easier it is for these, what I consider the predator class, parasites, to do what they do, which is to suck out the resources of this earth. They're not only mining the planet for the resources, but this is an important point. If you hear nothing, hear this. They are mining your mind. For the most important resource in the world is this space right here. This space right here between your skull, your mind, and everything that you have in there. That's the most important real estate there is. And everybody wants a piece of that. Right now, I'm trying to get a piece of it, and you guys are voluntarily letting me in there, right? But every time you watch a YouTube video, there's an ad right there trying to get your attention. Somebody's trying to sell you something. There's always people trying to get in that space. And the system, the people who run it, they're mining the planet for its resources, and they're mining our minds for our resources. So we have to be the ones that are in control of that. The more in control of your own mind, your own heart, the easier it is to access that trauma that we're talking about, to start healing those wounds. Oh, we're doing pretty good on time. Cool. That means we can go deeper. Who wants to go deeper? Always deeper! All right, so we talked a little bit about epigenetics, and is anybody not familiar with that term? Okay, we'll just define. So it's a somewhat newly emerging science that recognizes that our DNA, our genetics, are not static, like many of us were taught growing up. That our genes are not just this permanent state, that actually, again, the trauma, the stress that happens to each of us can literally change your DNA. And that can manifest in, say, hereditary illnesses or genetic illnesses or just different forms of trauma. And so part of recognizing that is we have the power to heal them, right? When I think of epigenetics and I think of my family, I see that these men that have struggled with their own pain and have continued to pass that down. And I sort of chose to be the first one in my family to say, I'm not going to let this continue on, right? I don't have any children myself, but I'm a proud uncle of six nieces and nephews, and I pray every day and I work every day that they never experience the things that me and my brother and sister had to go through because of our dad is gone. And now my brother and sister are being great parents, and they're there for them. And if I ever become a father, man, I'm going to be the best dad there ever was. It's a really scary thought, but if it happens. But no, because it's important, right? And we don't all grow up with the same familial situation, the same environment, but I think it is important for us to have good influences at the least, right? Whether that's a blood relative or not, but somebody that's a positive influence. And when you lack that, well, we go out into the world and we start looking for answers. And we learn it from our friends who are also messed up or dealing with their own trauma. And unless you're somebody who's growing up with, say, parents or an environment, which I think this is all of our I would say it's our duty going forward to educate the next generation so that they don't have to feel like many of us have felt when we spent years unlearning unhealthy things. Not only unlearning the bullshit that they taught us in various systems and media and lies we were told, but also unlearning unhealthy habits on how to process things, right? So if you grow up watching your parents use drugs or drink alcohol, and that's how they deal with things, there's a pretty good probability, you might be completely deterred from that activity, or you might follow it right up, right? Because we follow examples that are set. And this is, of course, the most important thing, is to lead by example, not just post on social media, here I am at Envision, my spirit has been healed, thanks for the likes, thanks for the comments, but to really get in there, And sometimes the most important work isn't posted on social media. Most of it isn't posted on social media, right? There's nothing wrong with it. I kind of rag on it a little bit for other reasons, but I do think that we got to get past that superficial stage, right? Because what I've seen from speaking at activist conferences and speaking at places like Envision, Lucidities, and other places, that I think that sometimes we can get wrapped up into just another trend of like, oh, now we're the ones who get it, right? Oh, we created our own conscious festivals and we got the right festival costume and doing this. It's just it can be just as superficial as the mainstream world that I think many of us are trying to get away from and trying to create something better. So we have to be conscious of that and just come real. Come with the realness always, right? Let's just keep it real and free the people. That's what one of my friends told me that, and I think that's so let's get to the actual process of the healing trauma. Like I said, I put the steps that I went through in prison to start making it into a very simple, digestible book. The book is like 40 pages long, and it's real simple because it doesn't. I try to take big psychological concepts as well as my own experiences and whittle them down to the most basic, simple language. So again, the very first question is, who am I? Who am I? Beyond labels. So, and this step I think is not like you just work this step once and like, okay, cool, I got to figure out who I am. This is probably something that for the rest of our lives is an evolving journey, because I don't know about you guys, but I'm not the same person I was 5 years ago. Definitely not the same person I was 15 years ago. And I hope I'm not the same person in 5 years. I'll keep my principles, but I'm going to keep evolving and keep growing and keep learning always. Anybody else want to keep being dynamic and growing, right? Like, let's not stay static. Let's keep growing as people. It's my goal to never stop learning, to never stop being excited about life. And again, part of that healing that trauma, you get to connect to that beautiful part of you that we call the inner child, right? How many of you have an active relationship with your inner child? Like, allow yourself to play, to enjoy, like to really be in tune with that. And think about the things that you used to enjoy when you were a kid. I did a really deep meditation after I got out of prison, when I was going through this journey. And it helped me recover a memory that I think I had kind of blocked out for a good time. And I was 7 years old in this memory, and I'm in my little baseball uniform, and I saw it so clearly in this meditation, and I'm in the driveway, like looking around, like I'm waiting for something. My mom keeps coming out, like, we gotta go, and I realized, oh shit, I'm waiting for my dad. He was one of these times where he got out of prison, he's like, I'm gonna be there for that baseball game or whatever. And I'm sitting there just waiting, like, hold on, just a couple more minutes, and then, eventually we gotta go, and I felt that pain, that like disappointment, that like deep pain. And I was in this meditation where when I went into it, again, I'm coming to get healed. So forget like, oh, I want to be cool and not cry. Like, I'm letting it all out, So I'm crying my eyes out. I feel, and the person who was guiding me, he did a really great job of saying, okay, describe what you're feeling. And I'm like, I'm angry. Like, this hurts. Like, why isn't he here? And he's like, no, don't tell me about it. Be that 7-year-old version of yourself and feel it. And I'm just like, why the fuck aren't you here? I mean, I'm screaming. I'm just like, why aren't you here? I need you. You know, just letting it out. And it was one of the biggest weights lifted off my shoulders I've ever experienced. Like, that was probably so far, one of the most healing experiences. And we continued, and the best part, though, is when we wrapped it up, he said, okay, now I want you to sit down. I want you to talk to that 7-year-old Derrick Broze and talk to him. And I got to just sit there and be like, dude, you are going to go through some crazy shit, but it's going to make you so strong. And you're going to grow so much. Do not give up. Just keep pushing. And have that generational healing that I'm talking about. Going back and visiting, not just your past ancestors, but yourself. Going back and healing those wounds. And man, that was, like I said, when it kind of wrapped up, I was just like in tears and just felt so much lighter. And the people that were kind of guiding had their hands on my back. We all just sat there in silence together and really just soaked it in. And that to me was the first time I actively started to realize, like, there is an inner child in here. There's a piece of me that's still that 7-year-old version of Derrick that's still hurt. And the crazy thing to realize is that when you start to become more connected to your inner child, you see the ways that you are actually acting like a little kid in your adult life, right? So maybe you're kind of pouty, right? You're like, damn it, I used to do this all the time when I was a kid. Mom would tell me I couldn't do something, I'd be over here. Maybe you're out with your friends and something happens, and next thing you know, you're over here on your phone by yourself. Screw these people. Damn it. I'm being a little kid again. You got to get over that and say, hey, like, this is uncomfortable. You really offended me back there, man. I really just would appreciate. Can we go talk aside for a minute? Like, I didn't like the way that happened, and I want to just make sure I get this off my chest. And remember, this is never about the other person. If you hold on to that shit, it is going to burn a hole inside of you. Find a way to communicate and to heal the wounds, with other people, whether that means forgiving them or self-forgiveness. So, who am I? And again, a big part of that journey is getting connected to your inner child, getting to know that deeper part of yourself. And that's the good things and the bad things. Like I said, it's both. It's that joy, that little piece of us that you guys see all these beautiful kids running around. Shout out to all the kids right here. I mean, this is the future generation, right? I mean, maybe some of you grew up with your parents bringing you to a place like this, but I sure didn't. Like, I can't imagine, like, man, they got so much potential within them, right? But it's also up to us to leave them something better. Anybody heard of the 7-generation principle? It comes from our indigenous communities as well, and it's up to us to think about the actions that we do today, not only how they're going to affect, say, I throw that piece of trash there on your lawn, it affects you, but her kids and your grandkids and the generation after that, up to the 7 generations and beyond. When you start to really incorporate that as a principle in your daily life, it changes the world. It changes, and if each of us do that, if we start thinking, it doesn't mean we have to forget ourselves and live selflessly. We still have our own goals and our own purpose and our own passions. But really knowing that if we don't do the work today, just imagine what the future generations are going to have to deal with today. And I mean like the world and the work in the physical world as well as this inner healing. Because if none of us do our healing, we're just handing them more trauma, more pain, and that cycle is going to continue. And I don't think it's going to get better until we face it. So connecting with your inner child is a part of that, beginning that healing process, connecting to that imagination, that joy inside of you, that when you were a kid and you knew you could fly, and I used to think, well, I still think, that I can make myself invisible whenever I want. And, I'd be in the growth. I think it was also probably like a mechanism for me to deal with life. Just like, all right, I got a button on my chest, boom, invisible. All right, nobody can see me. But, I mean, I swear I was probably invisible because I had that joy of being a child, and nobody had told me, like, hey, you can't be invisible, grow up. Get a real job, right? And there's these things that we get told as we're going through our life, and we forget that connection to that beauty, that part of our inner child. So there's the healing and the joy that can come from that. And I think that comes from that first question of who am I? And again, that's a big step, so it's not like something you figure it out right now and it's over. The second question to get into is, what are my principles? What does a principle mean to you? What are a definition of a principle? Morals and ethics. Anybody else? Your authentic truth. I like that. Guidance. Okay, exactly. So all of these, you guys are right on the money. A principle is something that guides you in your daily actions, right? This is something that when you're conscious of it and you stop and say, okay, well, to me, let's just say like somebody who's a vegan, right? I think it's immoral, or it's not part of my ethics to harm animals, right? So every decision you make is going to be guided by that. I don't buy animal products, I don't eat animals, right? That's a principle, that's like a first principle is what some people call it, that you refer to in all your decisions. The problem that I've seen is that many of us have ambitions, we have goals, we have dreams, but we haven't quite stopped to figure out how we want to get there, right? What are the principles that are going to guide you there? Because you can achieve your goals and then maybe achieve it in a way that's completely contradictory to what you actually believe in. You're like, damn it, I screwed over a bunch of people just to get to the top of that mountain. But if you're guided by your principles and your ethics, then you always stay consistent with that. So to me, one of the two main principles that I feel guided by, again, the 7-generation principle that we just talked about, and also what some people just call the golden rule, sometimes known as the non-aggression principle, is the idea that the initiation of force, coercion, or violence is wrong, immoral, unethical, right? Like me and you can have a discussion, we can disagree on a certain topic, but it's wrong for me to, hold you down and say, believe what I believe, right? You would say, like, that's not cool. Most of us would probably say, that's not right. And I use that in my daily everything, right? Is this decision I'm making going to cause harm to this person? Is it going to involve me having to use coercion or manipulation or force on somebody else? And that's why I see myself as an anarchist, because I think government itself is coercion. But that's a whole other conversation. But, so those are the principles that guide me. The golden rule, the 7-generation principle. There might be other things that are important to you, but the point is you start having that conversation. How many of us have stopped to consciously, like me? Okay, cool. We all generally think that we're good people, we're striving to be good people, right? But how often do we stop and say, okay, but what are the principles that are guiding you? Like, because if you don't have that compass, you can wake up every day and make decisions that when you turn around and look at them, none of them are in alignment. You're like, dang, I'm all over the place. Okay, I did this over here, but then that contradicts this, and then this doesn't align with this. It doesn't mean you're a bad person. It just means that, again, we're kind of living unconsciously. So getting to know yourself. Who am I? What are my principles? What do those principles mean to you, and how are they going to guide your life? The next question is, are my goals, and this is kind of a two-parter, but they're both separate, goals and habits. So what are your goals, right? And how can you achieve those goals in line with those principles that you just established are so important to you, right? So my principle is 7-generation principle. I want to make sure that any goal that I pursue and I achieve is not causing harm, or at least trying to reduce harm to the coming generations, right? Not that I use destruction, both emotionally and physically, to achieve this goal, thereby, kind of contradicting my 7-generation idea, right? So you start looking at what are those goals and are they in line with my principles? Then you look at your habits, and I think this is where you start to get to the real work of it. Your daily habits, right? Because a real simple one. Maybe you're like, okay, my goal this summer is to get that beach body I've always wanted and go out to Envision and feel nice and sexy. But then 6 months before Envision, you're sitting around playing video games and eating pizza all the time, right? There's a pretty good disconnect that's easy to see. You probably won't end up with that beach body you want, because although you have this goal, your daily habits do not align with that goal, right? Very simple and easy to see. Now let's imagine you come here to Envision and you see this beautiful talks and you're like, you know what, that's it. I'm learning permaculture, I'm starting my own intentional community. But then you go home and you don't bother researching what permaculture is. The learning doesn't continue when you go home, basically, right? Probably might not make that goal happen, or at least it's going to take longer. So this is why it's important to start looking, and that's why it's called the holistic self-assessment, because it's the whole thing, right? Some people will talk about, like, we need to work better with the earth, or we need to work better with what we communicate, or we need to go out there and be better activists, but I think it has to be all these things. Not just the outward, but the inward. Am I actually living in line with these things? Where am I on time, Drew?
Got 10 minutes, bro.
Cool, thank you. So just a real quick brief example of that. When I was in, doing a lot of activist marches and protests, I was involved with a bunch of different movements. And there was the March Against Monsanto movement. Anybody ever heard of March Against Monsanto? It was very big a few years ago around the world. And I was involved with the Houston one, and the group that I was involved with, we said, hey, the plan was we're going to go march around in circles, which is what all the protests do, and the cops are going to be there, and it's just going to be, it's a thing, right? Okay, cool. Do that. Let's go try to reach people in public. Our effort was to say, why don't we, after we leave the protest, let's all go to the local urban farm and learn how to grow some food, right? And we had probably 500 people show up to the march, and maybe 5 show up to the garden, right? And so there's a kind of a disconnect in the action, right? And your goal is to bring down Monsanto or to save the bees or to get rid of pesticides and the various things associated with that, but the physical action is lacking, right? Not only that, after we celebrate our march, we're like, yeah, let's go out for celebratory lunch, and we sit down and we're eating a bunch of GMO Monsanto corn chips. You're working against your own goals. There's a disconnect between stated goals, ambitions, dreams, and the actual habits. Now, we live in a very difficult world. It's hard to be perfect. Like, if you heard Rob's story, Rob does extreme things because he wants to send a message to people. He foraged his own food for a whole year. Wouldn't even accept a beer at the bar if you offered him. Like, nope, unless that beer was foraged out of the ground, I'm not eating it, I'm not drinking it, right? We don't all necessarily have to go to that extreme, but I think we should try to start taking steps in different ways, whatever your focus is on, to align your principles, your goals, and your daily habits. And the next question is, are my relationships in line with those same principles? Because maybe the relationship you have with your boss and with your workplace is actually completely contradictory to the things you believe in. I'm not here to judge anybody, but I think those are things we need to look at. I don't use banks. I don't participate in the tax system and various other systems because they don't align with the things I believe in, because I think I know they contribute to things that go against my values. So I find ways to live around those systems. Sometimes it makes it very difficult, but it's important to me, right? And we're all going to have a different line and different goal in that. But if we don't start aligning our actions, our habits, our goals, and our relationships with those principles, first by knowing who we are and who our inner child is and what our trauma is, and then understanding what our principles are, we're never going to achieve those goals. Is this making sense, guys?
Yeah.
We're almost done here. I appreciate y'all. So then we get to... So we talked about principles, goals, habits, and of course, this is all the main point here is aligning words with actions, right? It's been attributed to Buddha, but there's a quote that says, "Watch your thoughts because your thoughts become your words become your actions become your behavior, and your behavior becomes your destiny." So my goal has truly always been to, as an activist and as just a free human being, how can the things that I think up here and the way I see myself and that man that I want to be, that empowered warrior who lives with courage and is fearless and protects the community and comes from a place of compassion that I see up here and that I feel in here, but I don't always reflect out here. How can I work to strive towards that? And that's what this whole process is about, is aligning goals, habits, actions, aligning words with actions. And then the next part of the self-assessment is when you start to see these different areas that don't line up. It's not for me or anybody else to say, "Hey, dude, you're a hypocrite," or whatever. Or even for you to start getting down on yourself. What it does is present an opportunity for growth. For then you to be like, you know what? I have some inconsistencies right here. I'm not lining up with what I strive to be. And I can either just sit with that and say, "Oh, well, that sounds like too much work. I didn't really want to change the world anyways. That was just that was a costume I put on at the festivals." Or you can start doing that work. And I think that's what it's really going to take if we want to move the conversation forward and start growing and changing the world. We start thinking holistically. We look at the inconsistencies and then back to the trauma, the roots of those inconsistencies. So when I'm in prison and I'm taking myself through this process and I'm starting to see, holy crap, the reason I have all these inconsistencies of wanting to be a good person but then turning around and cheating on somebody or lying to them or just mistreating them or whatever, is because I have all these inconsistencies in my behavior. I want to be this good person. I see it in me, but I wasn't there yet. And it's a daily journey. And I had to first identify who I was, get to know my trauma, look at my actions, look at my goals, look at my habits, look at my relationships, think holistically, and see where the inconsistencies are and go at the root of it. Find the root of it and address it and stop ignoring it, stop spiritual bypassing, stop avoiding it with drugs, or with the internet, or with mindless sex, or whatever it may be. We all choose different things, gambling, whatever it may be. Stop avoiding it and starting to embrace the warrior inside of myself. Who's ready to embrace the warrior inside themselves? Guys, I really appreciate your time so much. Again, I have a workshop on Sunday here at the same stage, 11:30. It's called How to Localize, Decentralize, and Opt Out of the Matrix. I've got books and shirts over there. And everybody who's here who can hear my voice, we're going to end with this. This is the way I always end my talks. If you will, if you choose to feel like participating. One of the things that got me through prison, meditation, well, several things. Meditation, starting to learn the power of manifestation, positive affirmations, and visualization, all those tools together. And positive affirmations is something that I've used for a long time now. I like to conclude all of my talks with this affirmation. So if you feel inclined, please repeat after me. This is kind of, I guess, I don't know what it is, but I like it. It's an affirmation and it's on the shirts. So let's take a deep breath and then I'll do the affirmation. And we'll be done, guys. Thank you so much for your time. Let's get that deep breath in. I am powerful.
I am powerful.
I am beautiful.
I am beautiful.
I am free.
I am free.
Thank you guys for your time.